My grandfather wishes to thank the white man who gave life back to his granddaughter.
I just helped someone who was hurt.
Cowboy gave his only horse to a wounded Apache woman. What she offered him was beyond imagination. My name is Cole Thorne, and that morning, as the sun began its slow climb above the jagged rim of the Red Canyon, I stood staring at a sight that made my blood turn colder than the rivers in a Montana winter. Across the ridge, lined like statues carved from the bones of the earth itself, sat more than 70 Ute warriors. They did not move. They did not speak. Their silhouettes against the rising light looked less like men and more like the guardians of some ancient law I had trespassed without knowing. For hours since dawn they had been there, silent, unblinking, a living wall of judgment. Each man held something in his hand. At first my weary eyes thought it might be weapons, arrows, or the cruel curve of a tomahawk. But no, what they clutched were necklaces strung with the claws of bears, long ivory-white talons that caught the light in a way that chilled me. I had heard of such tokens before, whispered stories around frontier fires, but never had I seen them held in such unity, as if I stood at the center of a ritual I had no right to witness. My hand, out of habit, brushed the empty holster at my hip. The weight I once carried there, cold steel, that had kept me alive more times than I could count, was gone. I hadn't lost my gun. I had traded it days earlier for water, a foolish deal made in a saloon in Dusty Creek, when desperation gnawed at my belly. But in that moment, what unsettled me most was not the absence of the weapon. It was the absence of comfort. An empty holster is more than just leather. It is a reminder that a man stands naked before fate. Yesterday, that ridge had been empty. Yesterday, I had made a choice I told myself was simple. Yesterday, I had given my only horse, my only true companion, to carry a wounded Ute woman to safety. And now, 70 warriors sat before me with bear claws in their hands. Her name had been Weyanoke. She had whispered it with cracked lips before unconsciousness dragged her under. She had not been among them this morning. I searched their faces, their ranks, but hers was nowhere. Only men, silent as stone. I had expected arrows, war cries, death raining from above, but no such storm came, only silence. And silence, I had learned in this brutal land, was deadlier than a bullet. If you've wandered this far into my tale, then you must carry the same hunger for Wild West love stories as I do. So if you want me to keep breathing life into these dying embers of the frontier, comment a storm of number ones and write your place down below. Because maybe your place is here, among the echoes of a land that refuses to forget. I remember the moment that led me here as clear as the scars on my hands. A day's ride from Dusty Creek, through a canyon where the wind howled like wolves. I heard it, a sound that did not belong, a moan, faint, human. I followed it past the broken stones until I saw her. She lay collapsed by a creek bed that had long since dried, her body trembling with fever. A bandage, crude, soaked through with blood, wrapped her leg. Infection had already set in. Her lips moved with whispers I could not understand. Any man with sense would have ridden on. This was Ute land, a place where trespassers bled and were never found again. Helping one of their women could be seen as insult or worse. But there was something in her eyes, dark, shimmering with a dignity I had seen only once before in my life. My sister's eyes. In the last hours before, fever carried her away. I had lost everyone in this land. My ma, my pa, both to fever. My sister, God help me, I had lost her because I couldn't reach a doctor in time. That guilt was the heaviest saddle I carried, and it pressed down on me every dawn I woke. I had sworn, in the silence of her grave, that I would never again stand idle while someone slipped into death before my eyes. That oath was the chain around my soul, dragging me down every step of my lonely trail. So I did what I had promised. I dismounted. I lifted Weyanoke into my saddle without a word. Her head lolled, fevered and weak, her breath hot against my shoulder. She whispered in her tongue, words I could not piece together, though the cadence was soft, almost prayerful. For 6 hours, I led that horse on foot through rock and thorn while my legs burned and my throat dried. I had walked such distances in my cavalry days, yes, But that was years ago. My bones now ached with every mile. The sun fell, bleeding orange into the sky, but I pressed on. At last, I saw them 3 red stones, stacked upright like watchmen of the Ute boundary. Beyond them, scattered across the plain, their dwellings glimmered faint in the dusk. I helped her down. She staggered, half delirious, toward her people. And then I did something no sane man would have done. I slapped my horse on the flank and let him follow her. My only horse. My last piece of security in this merciless frontier. I watched his hooves kick up dust as he disappeared into the heart of Ute land. I stood there with nothing but my boots and my regrets. That was yesterday. Now, my body screamed from 18 hours of walking. My canteen was nearly dry, and 70 Ute warriors regarded me like a riddle carved into flesh and bone. The bear claw necklaces glimmered in the morning light. Their meaning I did not know. But their silence, I felt it pressing against my chest, heavier than any rifle trained on me. I thought of my life, and for the first time in years, I wondered if perhaps I had been walking toward this moment since birth. I had seen justice only at the barrel of a gun. I had seen good men rot and bad men prosper. And yet here, with the eyes of 70 warriors upon me, I felt something else. Not the threat of violence, but the weight of expectation. Then one man moved. He was older, gray, streaking through black hair, his face weathered as canyon stone. He lifted his hand. Instantly, the others shifted their horses into a new formation, deliberate, precise, like soldiers obeying a command I couldn't decipher. The elder rode down the ridge, his horse carrying him slow and steady toward me. Around his neck hung a necklace of small bleached bones, and from his belt dangled a scalp-brown hair, sun-faded, eerily close to the color of my own. My heart stopped. The warrior's eyes locked on me. Not angry, not vengeful, but steady, expectant. He halted 10 feet away, his necklace of claws catching the light, and spoke a single word. I could not understand it, yet it rang with weight. He pointed at my chest, repeated the word again, this time softer, but with reverence, as if I were not a trespasser, but something else entirely. The Ute word hovered in the space between us, heavy as stone, sharp as fate. And though I did not understand, my soul felt the truth. I had agreed to something yesterday without knowing it, and whatever it was, it had already begun. Behind him, the 70 mounted warriors remained statue still, their bare claw necklaces creating an eerie contrast against the harsh morning sky. I cleared my throat and tried the universal language of peace, raising both hands slowly. I don't want trouble. I helped your woman because she was hurt. That's all. The warrior tilted his head slightly, as if I had said something interesting but wrong. He repeated the Ute word, this time placing his hand over his heart, and then gesturing toward the ridge where Wyanoka had disappeared yesterday. When I still showed no understanding, the warrior did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a man wore when he knew a secret that would change everything. I felt a cold dread wash over me. In my life, a man with a secret smile was a man to be feared. He reached into a leather pouch at his side and pulled out an object that made my stomach drop. It was my horse's bridle, the one I had custom-made with distinctive silver conchos. But the leather was decorated now with small painted symbols that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. The warrior held up the bridle and spoke again, using different Ute words, but with the same tone of reverence. He pointed at me, then at the painted symbols, then back at me. The meaning was unmistakable. These symbols represented something about what I had done, and that something was significant enough to bring 70 warriors to attention. From the ridge, a new sound drifted down, singing high voices weaving together in a harmony that raised the hair on my arms. But this wasn't a war song. I had heard Ute war songs before, and they sounded nothing like this. This melody carried celebration, gratitude, and something else I couldn't identify. Something that sounded almost like mourning. The warrior noticed my confusion and nodded approvingly, as if my ignorance was exactly what he expected. He tucked the bridle back into his pouch and pulled out something else, a second bear claw necklace. identical to the ones carried by the other warriors. He offered it to me with both hands, speaking softly in Ute. I stared at the necklace. Accepting it felt like agreeing to something I didn't understand, but refusing it might be worse. I thought of all the times I had made a choice that led to a dead end, all the roads I had taken that led to nothing but empty promises and broken dreams. This felt like one of those choices, but with a finality I couldn't ignore. The warrior waited patiently, still holding the necklace between us, while the singing from the ridge grew stronger and more complex. Finally, I reached out and took the necklace. The moment my fingers touched it, the warrior nodded with deep satisfaction and turned to signal the others. Immediately, the entire formation began to move, not towards me, but parallel to my position, as if they were preparing to escort me somewhere. But escort me where? And why did accepting a simple necklace feel like I had just signed a contract written in a language I couldn't read? The singing continued, and I realized with growing unease that the melody was getting closer. More voices were joining in from somewhere behind me. When I turned around, my heart nearly stopped. Emerging from a canyon I hadn't even noticed was a procession of Ute women and children, led by an elderly man wearing an elaborate feathered headdress. And there, walking beside the elder, but moving slowly due to her injured leg, was Wayano. She was alive, conscious, and staring directly at me, with an expression that mixed gratitude with something that looked disturbingly like pity. The elderly man with the elaborate headdress approached me with steps that suggested both ceremony and purpose. His weathered face carried the kind of authority that came from decades of making decisions that affected entire tribes. Behind him, the procession of women and children maintained their singing, but I could see them watching my every movement with intense curiosity. Wayanoke limped forward, favoring her injured leg, but moving with determination. When she reached me, she spoke to me in careful English, her accent thick, but her words clear. "My grandfather wishes to thank the white man who gave life back to his granddaughter." I felt my confusion deepen. I just helped someone who was hurt. Anyone would have done the same thing. Wayanoke translated my words to the elder, who listened intently and then spoke back in rapid Ute. His tone suggested he was correcting something important. Wayanoke nodded and turned back to me, her dark eyes serious. "My grandfather says you speak words that are not true. Most men would not have helped. Most white men would have ridden past, or worse. But you gave away your most valuable possession to save the life of an enemy. This is not what anyone would do. This is the action of someone who follows the old codes." The elder stepped closer and placed his hand on my shoulder. When he spoke again, his voice carried deep emotion that transcended language barriers. Wayanoke listened carefully before translating. He says, "You have honored the sacred law of the horse gift. When a warrior gives his horse to save a life, he binds himself to that life and that life's people. You did not know this law, but ignorance does not change the binding. You are now connected to our tribe in ways that must be honored." My mouth went dry. Connected? How? What does that mean exactly? The singing stopped abruptly, and the sudden silence felt ominous. The elder studied my face for a long moment, then spoke a single word in Ute. Every warrior on the ridge responded by raising their bear claw necklaces high above their heads. The gesture looked like a salute, but I sensed there was more to it than simple respect. Wayanoke's expression grew troubled as she translated. He says, "The connection requires a choosing. The sacred law demands that the giver of the horse gift must now prove whether his heart truly matches his actions. If yes, he joins the tribe as family. If no." She paused, glancing nervously at the armed warriors surrounding us. "If no, what?" I asked, though I suspected I didn't want to hear the answer. If no, the gift was a lie, and lies about sacred things must be punished. The horse would be returned to you, but your spirit would be considered poisoned. You would be marked as one who steals honor through false generosity. I looked around at the 70 warriors, the elder's unwavering gaze, and Wayanoke's worried face. I was trapped between two choices I didn't fully understand, both of which would change my life forever. The bear claw necklace in my hand suddenly felt heavier than my missing horse, and I realized that my simple act of kindness had somehow triggered an ancient ritual that I was completely unprepared for. The elder spoke again, and this time his words carried the weight of finality. Wayanoke's translation hit me like a physical blow. The choosing ceremony begins at sunset. Until then, you are our guest. After sunset, you will be either our brother or our enemy. There is no third path. The Ute village was unlike anything I had imagined. Hidden in a natural basin between towering rock formations, it consisted of traditional dwellings arranged in precise patterns that spoke of generations of careful planning. What struck me most was the complete absence of hostility. Children watched me with open curiosity. Women nodded respectfully as I passed, and men studied me with expressions that suggested they were measuring something I couldn't identify. Wayanoke walked beside me, her limp more pronounced now, but her determination unwavering. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. You are wondering why no one shows fear or anger toward a white man in their sacred place, she observed. I nodded. The thought had crossed my mind. I expected something different. Fear and anger are for enemies. You are not yet enemy, and you are not yet family. You are between worlds, which makes you sacred until the choosing ceremony reveals your true nature. She paused beside a large fire pit where several women were preparing food. My grandfather wants you to understand what you will face at sunset. They approached a dwelling larger than the others, decorated with symbols that seemed to tell stories I couldn't read. The elder waited inside, seated on a woven mat with various objects laid out before him. I recognized my horse's bridle among them, but there were other items too. A knife with an ornate handle, a small clay pot filled with what looked like paint, and a bundle of sage tied with sinew. The elder gestured for me to sit across from him. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of ritual and tradition. Wayanoke translated carefully, pausing frequently to ensure accuracy. He says the choosing ceremony has 3 parts. First, you must demonstrate that your gift came from genuine caring, not from seeking advantage or glory. Second, you must show that you understand the sacred nature of sacrifice by making one yourself. Third, you must prove that you can put the welfare of the tribe above your own survival. I felt cold sweat begin to form despite the warmth of the dwelling. What kind of sacrifice? And how exactly do I prove that last part? The elder seemed to understand English better than he spoke it because he responded before Wayanoke could translate. He picked up the ornate knife and held it so the blade caught the light filtering through the dwelling's entrance. Then he spoke in Ute, his tone grave and ceremonial. Wayanoke's face went pale as she listened. When she translated, her voice was barely above a whisper. The sacrifice is a test of trust. You must allow yourself to be bound and placed in a situation where only the tribe's mercy will save your life. If your original gift was pure, they will save you. If it was false, they will let you die as punishment for dishonoring their sacred laws. I stared at the knife, understanding now why the 70 warriors had seemed so calm and expectant. They weren't here to fight me. They were here to judge me, and depending on that judgment, they would either welcome me as family or watch me die for the crime of false generosity. The elder set down the knife and picked up the clay pot. He dipped his finger in the paint and drew a symbol on his own forehead, then offered the pot to me. The message was clear. The ceremony was already beginning. Whether I was ready or not, outside the sun had moved considerably toward the western horizon. I realized with growing dread that I had perhaps 2 hours to decide whether to submit to a test that could easily kill me, or to try to flee across open country on foot while being pursued by 70 mounted warriors. Either choice seemed like a path to death, but one would at least preserve my honor in the eyes of people who had already shown me more respect than I deserved. I took the clay pot with trembling hands, the weight of my decision settling on me like a stone. The paint was still warm from the elder's touch, and its earthy scent reminded me of the adobe church where my mother used to pray. I thought about her now, wondering what she would have told me to do in a situation that no Sunday sermon had ever prepared me for. The elder watched patiently as I dipped my finger in the paint. The old man's eyes held no judgment, only the kind of steady attention that came from a lifetime of watching people face impossible choices. When I finally drew the same symbol on my forehead that the elder wore, the old man nodded with something that might have been relief. "You have chosen to trust us with your life," Wayanoke translated as the elder spoke. "Now we must prepare you for what comes at sunset." They led me outside where the entire village seemed to be in motion. Men were arranging stones in a large circle. Women were weaving long ropes from plant fibers, and children were gathering specific types of wood that I didn't recognize. Everyone moved with the fluid efficiency of people who had performed these tasks many times before, but there was an underlying tension that suggested this ceremony was not routine. "How often does this happen?" I asked Wayanoke as we walked toward the stone circle. "The horse gift ceremony?" "Not often. Maybe once in a generation, if ever. Most people are not foolish enough to give away their only means of survival for a stranger." She paused, studying my face. "Or brave enough." 3 young warriors approached, carrying what looked like ceremonial clothing. The elder spoke to them briefly, then turned back to me. Through Wayanoke, he explained that I must wear traditional Ute clothing during the ceremony, as my own clothes represented the world I was choosing to leave behind. As I changed clothes, I noticed that the 70 warriors from the ridge had positioned themselves around the village perimeter. They were no longer watching me specifically, but their presence created an unmistakable message. There would be no escape once the ceremony began. The bear claw necklaces they carried were now attached to their horses' bridles, creating an eerie visual reminder of my commitment. "Tell me about the first test," I said to Wayanoke as she helped me adjust the unfamiliar garments. The one about proving my gift was genuine. Wayanoke hesitated, glancing toward her grandfather before answering. "You must speak truthfully about why you helped me, but not just speak. You must allow the tribe's wisest members to question you while you are bound and unable to defend yourself with anything but words. They will ask you things designed to expose any hidden motives, any selfishness, any lies you tell yourself about your own goodness." I felt my stomach clench. And if they decide I was lying to myself about my motives, then the ceremony ends immediately, and you are taken to the edge of our territory and released. Your horse is returned to you, and you are free to go, but you are also marked forever as someone who cannot be trusted, and no Ute will ever help you again, no matter how desperate your situation. The sun had moved noticeably lower, casting longer shadows across the village. I could see that the stone circle was nearly complete, and several elders had gathered near it, discussing something in low voices. Their expressions were serious, and occasionally one of them would look in my direction with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "What happens if I pass the first test?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Wayanoke's expression grew grim. "Then you face the second test, the test of sacrifice. And that one, my new friend, is much more dangerous than having your motives questioned." "Hey there, friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. It's easy to forget, but staying hydrated is crucial for your health. Also, if you've been sitting for a while, do a quick lap around the room and give your eyes a break from the screen. Your body will thank you." The sun touched the horizon as I found myself seated in the center of the stone circle, my hands bound behind my back with rope that felt stronger than leather. The entire village had gathered around the perimeter, their faces illuminated by torches that cast dancing shadows across the assembled crowd. The 70 warriors formed an outer ring, still as sentinels, their bear claw necklaces moving gently in the evening breeze. 5 elders sat facing me, each one wearing elaborate paint designs that marked their status as judges in this ancient proceeding. The elderly man, who was Wayanoke's grandfather, sat in the center, flanked by 2 men and 2 women, whose weathered faces spoke of decades spent making life and death decisions for their people. Wayanoke stood beside her grandfather, ready to translate, but I sensed that some of these elders understood English better than they let on. The way they watched my face when I spoke suggested they were reading more than just my words. The questioning began gently. Why had he been in Ute territory? I explained about searching for new grazing land after the drought had destroyed my small ranch. Where was his family? Gone, I told them honestly. My parents dead from fever, my sister from complications in childbirth, no wife or children of my own. My voice was a low whisper, but the air hung so still, I knew every soul in that circle heard me. Then the questions became more pointed. Had he helped Weyanoke because he hoped to gain something from the Ute people? I denied this, explaining that I had expected nothing but trouble from my actions. Did he consider himself a good man who deserved reward for his kindness? This question made me pause because I wasn't sure how to answer honestly. I don't know if I'm good, I finally said. I just know that leaving someone to die when I could help felt wrong. The female elder to my left spoke in rapid Ute, her tone sharp and challenging. Weyanoke translated reluctantly. She asks why you did not try to take me to your own people for medical care. Why give me to the Ute when you could have been seen as a hero among whites for saving me? I felt sweat forming despite the cool evening air. The question cut to something I hadn't fully examined in my own mind. Because she belonged with her own people, I answered, the words feeling true as I said them. Taking her away from everything she knew would have been another kind of cruelty. The male elder to my right leaned forward and spoke a single sentence in Ute. Weyanoke's eyes widened as she translated. He says, "You speak of cruelty, but you condemned yourself to walk many miles through dangerous country with no horse, no weapons, and little water. Was this kindness to yourself? Or was it punishment for some guilt you carry?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Images flashed through my mind. My sister's face as she died because I couldn't get her to a doctor in time. My parents' graves that I had abandoned when the ranch failed. All the times I had chosen the safe path instead of the right one. Was saving Weyanoke an act of redemption or just another way to hurt myself? Maybe both, I whispered, and the honesty of it surprised me. The 5 elders spoke among themselves in voices too low for me to hear. I watched their faces, trying to read expressions that revealed nothing. Finally, Weyanoke's grandfather stood and addressed the crowd in ceremonial tones that carried across the entire village. When he finished speaking, Weyanoke approached me with tears in her eyes. "You have passed the first test. The elders believe your heart was true when you helped me." She paused, wiping her face. "But now comes the test of sacrifice, and I must warn you what they are about to ask of you. Even I do not know if I could do it." 2 young Ute men approached me with a wooden box that they sat down beside me with reverent care. When Weyanoke's grandfather opened it, I saw the contents and felt my blood turn cold. Inside were 5 arrows, each one marked with a different colored band and a small piece of leather with symbols painted on it. The elder lifted the leather and showed it to the crowd, speaking in ceremonial tones that carried across the silent village. When he finished, Weyanoke approached me with obvious reluctance. "The test of sacrifice requires you to choose which member of our tribe will face danger to prove your worthiness," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 5 of our people have volunteered to risk their lives for your ceremony. The arrows represent different trials, each one dangerous but survivable if the person is skilled and blessed with luck. I stared at the arrows, horrified. "I don't understand. I'm supposed to choose someone else to risk their life for me. That's not sacrifice. That's cruelty." "That is exactly the point," Weyanoke replied. "The test measures whether you will allow others to suffer for your benefit or whether you will find another way. Many who take this test choose an arrow immediately, thinking that someone else's risk is acceptable payment for their own acceptance into the tribe." The elder spoke again, and Weyanoke continued translating. "But there is another choice. You can refuse to select an arrow and instead offer to face all 5 trials yourself. This has never been done, because no one can survive all 5 trials alone. It would be certain death." I felt the weight of an impossible decision crushing down on me. Around the circle, I could see 5 Ute volunteers standing ready. There was a young man barely out of boyhood, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, an older warrior with scars marking his arms, a teenage girl who reminded me painfully of my dead sister, and a man about my own age, with a wife and small children visible in the crowd behind him. "What are the trials?" I asked, though I suspected the answer wouldn't help my decision. Weyanoke pointed to each arrow in turn. "The red arrow means crossing the rapids at Devil's Canyon at night. The black arrow means entering the cave where the mountain lions den and retrieving a stone from the deepest chamber. The white arrow means climbing the cliff face that no one has successfully climbed in living memory. The yellow arrow means walking alone into the territory of the rival tribe that killed 3 of our people last spring and returning with proof of peaceful contact. The blue arrow means, she paused, her voice breaking slightly. The blue arrow means allowing yourself to be bitten by a rattlesnake and relying on traditional medicine to save your life. Each trial represented almost certain death, and I was expected to choose which innocent person would die for my acceptance into a tribe I had never asked to join. The 70 warriors watched from their positions around the village perimeter, their bear claw necklaces now seeming less like decoration and more like markers for a funeral that had not yet happened. I closed my eyes and thought about my sister's final words to me. She had told me that real courage wasn't about being unafraid, but about doing what was right, even when fear consumed you. She had also told me that some things were worth dying for, and protecting innocent people was at the top of that list. When I opened my eyes, I looked directly at Weyanoke's grandfather. I won't choose an arrow. If someone has to face these trials for my acceptance, it will be me. All 5 trials tonight. The elder's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes that might have been respect. The crowd murmured in surprise, and the 5 volunteers looked at me with expressions ranging from relief to amazement. But it was the reaction of the 70 warriors that surprised me most. As one, they removed the bear claw necklaces from their horses' bridles and raised them high above their heads, creating a forest of dark plumes against the darkening sky. If you're watching on television, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. Weyanoke's grandfather rose slowly from his seated position, the movement deliberate, as though each joint carried the weight of centuries. His weathered face, lined with valleys of time and sorrow, revealed an emotion that I could neither fully read nor deny. His eyes, dark and unwavering, studied my resolute expression, as if he were searching for the last hidden corner of my soul. Around us, the silence of the Ute village thickened, broken only by the faint crackle of a nearby fire and the restless snorts of tethered horses. When the elder finally spoke, his voice in Ute rolled like thunder over mountains, carrying not mere words but the authority of absolute decision. It was not the tone of a man debating or questioning. It was the voice of law, of memory, of the weight of ancestors who had walked this land before any of us were born. His language was foreign to me, yet the cadence struck deep, like a drumbeat echoing from the earth's core. And then, when he finished, the 70 warriors who had gathered responded with a sound unlike anything I had ever heard. A low, rhythmic chant, so primal, so ancient, that it seemed less sung by men than awakened from the stones beneath our feet. It wasn't a sound of victory or mourning, but something between, as if the earth itself spoke through them. Weyanoke stepped forward, tears streaming freely down her copper-toned face. Her hands trembled as she raised them, as though the responsibility of carrying her grandfather's words weighed more than her slender frame could bear. Her voice broke, yet it rang clear as she translated. He says, "No man in the history of our people has ever offered to face all 5 trials alone. Such willingness to die rather than cause harm to innocent people proves a heart that is already Ute, whether the blood runs Ute or not." The words struck me like a blow. My throat tightened. The choice I had made, born more from desperation than heroism, was being received as something monumental, sacred. But the elder was not finished. His deep voice rolled again, and as Weyanoke spoke, her voice shook under the weight of the revelation. He says, "The trials are ended. You have already passed the test of sacrifice by proving you would rather die than allow others to suffer for your benefit. The horse gift law is satisfied, and you are declared brother to our tribe." A ripple of shock passed through the assembled crowd. Warriors who moments before had regarded me with cold suspicion now exchanged glances heavy with disbelief. And within me, confusion mingled with relief in a storm that left me unsteady on my feet. "But I haven't actually done anything yet," I protested weakly, my voice breaking the silence. "I just said I would." For the first time since I had met him, the elder's lips curved into a smile, soft, knowing, and impossibly kind. When he spoke again, his words carried no thunder, only wisdom. Through Wayanoke, he explained, the trials exist to reveal the heart, not to cause death. A man who chooses certain death over possible harm to others has shown his heart completely. No further proof is needed. I felt my breath catch. My whole life, I had been measured by what I did with my hands, with my gun, with my strength, never by what lived quietly, trembling, within my chest. What happened next took my breath away entirely. The 70 warriors dismounted in perfect unison, boots striking the earth as one. The precision was almost martial, yet it carried no aggression, only solemnity. One by one, they began walking toward the great stone circle where I stood. The first warrior knelt before me and removed his bear claw necklace, laying it at my feet. The gesture was slow, deliberate, reverent. Another followed, then another, until the ground before me filled with a growing mound of tokens. Each man added something from his belt or saddle pack, a knife gleaming with hand-forged steel, blankets woven with patterns that carried stories of generations, carved jewelry polished smooth by years of touch. I stood in stunned silence as the pile grew into a small mountain of devotion and respect. And then came the final gift. One warrior led my horse forward. But it was no longer the same weary animal I had left behind. He wore new Ute tack, richly decorated with beadwork and painted symbols that spoke of honor and protection. The sight of him nearly undid me, for he was no longer merely my horse. He had been transformed into a living emblem of my acceptance among them. The lead warrior, a gray-haired man whose presence commanded attention, stepped closer. His English was careful, deliberate. "White brother, we came here to witness judgment. We expected to take a body away for burial or to escort a new tribal member to our camps in the mountains. We did not expect to meet a man worthy of the greatest honor our people can bestow." My voice shook as I whispered, "What honor?" The warrior smiled, his eyes shining with a quiet pride. "You are invited to carry the protection of 70 families. Each necklace represents a warrior's pledge that your safety is as important as the safety of his own children. Each gift represents a household that will shelter you, feed you, and defend you as long as you live. This has been given to only 3 white men in all our history, and never before to a man who was not born among us. If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. From the bottom of my heart, I wish your day is filled with health and happiness, and may a little stroke of luck find you in the next 15 minutes. Don't forget to share it with me in the comments." Wayanoke's grandfather approached, his frame bent but his spirit towering above us all. He placed both hands on my shoulders, the gesture heavy with meaning. His eyes locked into mine, and though I did not understand his words, I felt their sacred weight. He says, "You came to us as a stranger who gave a gift. You leave as a brother who received 70 gifts in return. Your horse was returned with honor markings that will ensure safe passage through any Ute territory. But more than that, you have shown our people that some white men understand the true meaning of courage and sacrifice." The air around me shimmered with the weight of what had transpired. I mounted my horse, the saddle now adorned with 70 bear claw necklaces that clinked softly together, each one a promise, a protection, a bond unbreakable. And as I sat there, something shifted within me. My heart, once hollowed by grief, regret, and years of wandering, now felt full not with joy, but with purpose, with belonging. As I prepared to leave, the entire tribe gathered, their faces no longer suspicious, but filled with respect. Children waved, women sang softly, and the men stood like pillars of stone, watching me as one watches a brother ride into a new life. Wayanoke stepped forward one last time, her dark eyes glistening with both pride and sadness. "Where will you go now, brother?" she asked softly. I turned my gaze toward the horizon where my old life waited. That old life, a life of solitary hunting, of keeping company with ghosts, of running from a past too heavy to bear. And then I looked back at the Ute village, where I had discovered something about myself I never knew existed. The desert, once a place of exile, now felt like a homecoming. The mountains no longer loomed like prisons of stone, but like guardians. The canyons, endless and red, whispered not of loss but of discovery. The sun dipped low, setting the sky ablaze with fire red and molten gold. For the first time in years, I saw not an ending but a beginning. "I think I'll head north toward the mountains," I answered softly. "I hear there's good grazing land up there, and it seems I have some new neighbors to get to know." The 70 warriors mounted once more, forming an honor escort. As I rode out of the village, surrounded by their presence, it felt like being carried on a tide of brotherhood. The necklaces on my saddle caught the last rays of light, their bear claws gleaming like stars fallen to earth. This was not a love story in the way most folks imagine it, but it was, in truth, a love story nonetheless, a cowboy love story of the deepest kind. A love for humanity, for honor, for the grace that transforms a wanderer into a brother. It was a Wild West love like no other, a testament that in the brutal heart of the frontier, a single act of kindness could ignite a Wild West love story that changed everything. And so, as I vanished into the horizon, I carried not only the weight of 70 bear claws, but the unshakable truth that even the darkest trails can lead to light. Today's story is about pains that seemed to have no way out, until a small ray of light changed everything.